is the year 136 of the Universal Century. 3 years had passed since the long and arduous war between the Jupiter Empire and the Crossbone Vanguard. Last we left Tobias Aronnax and company, the pirate kid vowed to carry on the legacy of his predecessor, inheriting Kincaid's Crossbone Gundam X1 Kai. The Crossbone Gundam Skullheart manga ran from 2003 to 2004, being serialized in Gundam Ace, with the story proper being composed of short stories made to somewhat bridge the gap between the late 90s run of Crossbone and Steel 7. We also get a designated narrator character in this one, who goes by the name of Twink Stella Laberadu. She is a cheerful little girl that used to live on an asteroid base, and after joining the space pirates, she took it upon herself to chronicle the tales of the crew she's traveling with. Without excessively retreading what I already touched on, we get some panels from the 90s run as she ponders on why is she writing these chronicles in the first place. This musing is momentarily interrupted by Old Man Umon, repeating his favorite tall tale about how he took out 6 rectums in a ball, and while Yona and Toby aren't particularly looking forward to hearing it again, our narrator with a long name sure is. All the way back in December 0079, the preparations for the eventual EFF attack on Solomon are underway. However, among these armed forces is a mechanic by the name of Umon Salmon, and he just came up with a trick of sorts that might throw off the defending Zeon forces, getting smacked for his trouble. That's right, this is where the infamous Ball Gundam, or B Gundam for short, hails from. A modified RB-79 ball with a makeshift Gundam mask bolted onto the front. Still, Umon's commanding officer, Yona Kinnison, not to be confused with the other Yona, can't afford to order him to dismantle this modification, as the first wave of attacks is about to begin, and they're gonna need every single unit out in the field. As such, the jury-rigged Ball Gundam sorties among the crowds of RGM-79 GMs and RB-79 balls towards the Solomon Space Fortress. One of the captains of the Salamis-class cruisers spots the Ball Gundam, being briefly taken aback. Well, it's time for the B Gundam to show what it's made of, with Umon getting an earful from the 0079 Yona, who repeatedly calls him an idiot. That being said, young man Umon is confident in his abilities. Well, to be fair, he's mostly trying to play it cool in front of the CEO he has a crush on. But still, the Gundam mask on his flying coffin might just be the thing that gives him a fighting chance. Or maybe not. As it turns out, the added weight from the modifications messed up the balance of the B Gundam, making the machine spin uncontrollably through the battlefield. At the same time, the sight of an approaching Gundam head just popping out of nowhere led some to believe that the old RX-78-2 from the White base is done for. It even supposedly got Anavelgato to rest on his laurels and leave his defensive post, opening some much-needed gaps in Solomon's defenses for the Federation to exploit. On the note of Rigdom pilots though, a trio of legally distinct black tri-stars was stationed there as well, and the recent reports of the supposed demise of a major Federation asset got them relaxed. Meanwhile at the command center, the troops spot a Gundam head poking out from the rocks. Contrary to what they might suspect, it is Umon's machine. Using the initial moment of surprise, Umon blasts one of the nearby Rigdoms with its cannon, ripping whoever the unfortunate bastard was into the smithereens. It's not just the troops defending the asteroid that are shocked. The whole command center started making assumptions about how big the Gundam they spotted is, given that they only saw the head. And it is more than implied that the size of the MSN02 Perfect Zeonk can be blamed on these misconceptions. At this point, the actual Gundam arrives, making mincemeat of the Zeon defenses. The stationed 3-man team of Rigdoms perk up at the mention of a second Gundam, and they finally decide to get out there. Apparently, they seem to think that the rumors of the tall Gundam are real, and that the small quote-unquote 20-meter Gundam is an imposter, and as such, they set out to take the Federation's white giant. In the meantime, the B Gundam started racking up a body count, already having shot down 3 DOMs since it left its ship, much to the surprise of his CO. After clearing up an entrance point, Umon decides to stay in the back to capitalize on the confusion. But that ain't happening. As he bickers with Yona, the 3 Rigdoms finally arrive. It's the bargain Bing Black Tri-Skulls. Got it. Anyways, each of the 3 is packing 1 giant bazooka and a heat saber respectively, and they're closing in rather fast. Worse yet, the Skull Squad saw through the crappy attempt at deception, and now they're mocking him. Suddenly, one of the Rigdom pilots snaps out of his laughter and lobs a rocket at Yona's GM. This gets Umon to shake himself out of the initial shock and prepare to retaliate. But before he does so, he spots a blurry silhouette right in front of him. It's another Rigdom, though this one went for a more melee-focused approach with its heat saber. Umon now realizes that at this point it's do or die, and he chooses to be foolhardy over being toast. First off, gun. Good idea, but the aim is not there. Thing is, this attack was used as an evasive option, not an offensive one. which is something the Rickdown pilot notices way too late. Using a cannon and the B-Gundam's awful weight distribution, Umon manages to not only keep up with the three Rickdowns, he genuinely gets the entire trio to break a sweat. The downside to these maneuvers is that it can't be good for Umon's stomach. As for the three Rickdown pilots, they start to worry about potentially fighting a new type, while one of them tries to go after the B-Gundam directly. This doesn't seem to be a good idea, which is further reinforced by Umon literally beheading a Rickdown with its cannon. Funnily enough, the enemy machine gets hit so hard it fucking explodes. The Rickdown pilot that appears to be the leader of the Zeon trio is absolutely mortified at the sight, cursing his late compatriot for his carelessness, while his remaining teammate ponders whether the feat he just witnessed was something deliberate. Umon, halfway drowning in dizziness, proceeds to grab a rock. Glancing at the still spinning B-Gundam, the younger of the two Rickdown pilots can't help but get mesmerized, only to notice it was too late to get out of dodge. Now closing in at lethal speed, the space rock proceeds to get rammed into the mechanical torso of the Zeon pilot's Rickdown, but not before a shot from a nearby Zakrello flew out, striking the improvised weapon and sending Umon flying. At long last, the young fatty pilot was no longer spinning, now free to vomit in the aftermath of his wild ride. At the same time, a black silhouette in front of him made it very clear that the end was yet to come. Clutching the B-Gundam with its grasp, the remaining Rickdown is absolutely livid about Umon's shenanigans, and how his slapstick way of fighting had sullied the battlefield, all the while trying to pulverize the young pilot's machine. To Umon, however, this attempt to pontificate rang hollow. Now being literally too pissed off to die, he caves the Rickdown's head in, blinding his adversary. With the B-Gundam's cannon being more or less busted, he decides to play the ace up his sleeve and detonate a set of explosive bolts, launching the heavy metal mask at his foe. Apparently, this managed to take out the remaining Rickdown, knocking it off balance and into a large asteroid. The last Rickdown is done for. By this time, the battle itself was starting to come to a close, with both Umon Salmon and Yona Kinnison falling back to the cockpit of the latter's RGM-79GM. Yona tells him that he did pretty well for a ball pilot, although he did miss one important detail. As it turns out, she's engaged, so this whole stunt to try and impress her was for naught. Though victorious in battle, the young pilot had still lost. His feat of taking out 6 Rickdowns in a ball never made it into the annals of history, being vastly outdone by a teenager from Side 7. Who piloted the Gundam. 50 years later, Umon is still alive and kicking, and it appears that he is still the same energetic rascal. It is now the year 129 of the Universal Century, and a man by the name of Kincaid now has come to look at his new machine. The Crossbone Gundam X1 is standing in the hangar in all of its glory. However, to the now old man Umon, it's missing something. A skull insignia, to be exact. We return back to UC-133 for a brief glance at our narrator's backstory. As such, we follow Twink Stella Laboradu, a little girl living on an asteroid accompanied by 2 books. One of them is the 1911 novel by J.M. Barrie called Peter Pan and Wendy, and the other one being a 1943 children's book, The Little Prince, penned by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. My French is god-awful, so I'm hoping I didn't butcher the name of the latter too much. That much is needed to explain why she referred to the Mother Vanguard ship as the ship of Captain Hook, while calling the ship's figurehead Tinkerbell. Hopefully, all is clear, so let's continue. The asteroid that the Crossbone Vanguard stopped by was crawling with Jovian forces, likely one of many traps that the Empire has set for them. Considering the circumstances, this has to have happened sometime between the events of Chapter 3, maybe Chapter 6 and Chapter 10 of the original 1990s run of Crossbone Gundam. Considering that Toby is using a captured EMS-10 Pez-Betala, which got destroyed during the attack of Professor Karras and the Death Kill Squad. In the initial attack, the Pirate Kid's machine took a nasty hit, which sends him crashing onto the asteroid. To Tobia's surprise, in the aftermath of the crash, he awakens elsewhere, with a young girl floating nearby. The room he resides in appears to be inside the asteroid base itself. The girl introduces herself with an odd name and starts to wonder whether Tobia is Peter Pan for some reason. The now confused Pirate Kid catches us up on where we're at in terms of timeline, placing this story between the raid on EO and the ambush at the hands of the JJBA class. While looking for supplies on their way towards Earth, the Crossbone Vanguard sort of stumbled upon the asteroid base. As for the base itself, it used to be a resource mine that had been forcefully converted into a Jovian garrison/supply point. This takeover also left Twink, our humble narrator, an orphan. For 10 years, she had lived on this base, and as we can see, it was not particularly healthy for her psyche. Tobia does get shaken up by this revelation, but he promptly composes himself and puts on his usual brave front, Thing is, as the two converse, they start heading towards trouble, with the obvious source of peril being the Jupiter forces stationed here. Worse yet, the princess, quote-unquote, decides to be a double agent and decides to smack Tobia with a wrench. The boy gets knocked out cold, albeit briefly. When he comes to, he's facing down a bunch of Jovian soldiers. As it turns out, Twing wants to trade Tobia off for the asteroid sovereignty. A shitty thing to do, but a somewhat understandable one. Thing is, the Jovian forces here are assholes, who intend on blowing up the whole asteroid in order to take out Mother Vanguard with it, since it no longer has any use to them. This finally gets Tobia on his feet. But before he or his adversaries could try anything funny, a nearby battle erupts into flames. Kincaid now has finally arrived to pick up the pirate kid, sweeping the Empire's soldiers away with the hand of his machine. As the fight goes on, Tobia decides to make a run for it with Twink and Tau, while the Jovians call in a bunch of mobile armors. The mobile armors that Kincaid is facing are the JMV-07 mono arms, a predecessor to the large Nautilus model, and their timing couldn't be worse, running into the pilot of the X-1 as he's low on ammo. These units also come with their eponymous weapon, a giant claw with beam blades at its three tips, putting the space pirate on his back foot. In the meantime, Tobia has managed to reach his Pez Batala, and tries to get it up and running, but the machine won't budge. It's busted. This is bad. The only thing that can be used on that hunk of junk is its beam axe, which the boy makes very good use of. Calling Kincaid, he jumps out of the machine's cockpit, leaving his mobile suit behind as an improvised weapon for the X-1. And a damn good weapon at that. With a single swing, the space pirate cleaves through the mono arm in front of him, tearing the machine asunder. Other mobile armors soon follow as well, each of them gutted and lit ablaze by a mobile suit-sized axe. Once the fighting is over, Tobia asks Twink whether she wants to come with them, but our humble narrator has a sizable backlog of books to finish, declining the offer. She only asks that they pay her a visit one day. With that, the Crossbone Vanguard leaves, and we're treated to a panel that pays homage to Little Prince in a way. Flash forward 2 years and we're treated to a familiar sight. A carrier ship is being attacked, though this time the culprits do appear to be from the Jupiter Empire. Harrison Madden is on the case, but a distant silhouette makes it abundantly clear they've got company. It's the space pirates. Atop the mast of Captain Unmo's supply ship, the Little Grey, a cloaked Gundam waits for its time to strike. Accompanying Tobia's machine are 4 flints, which rush out towards the carrier. Although Harrison had fought alongside them before, he is forced to order his men to intercept the Crossbone Vanguard. As the skirmish begins, it is made clear that the Federation forces are here on a mission. Apparently, there is confidential intel, receipts to be exact, of a major Earth Federation forces scandal stashed amidst the cargo, so the top brass dragged him out here to basically save face. Surprisingly, Harrison was being a good sport about it, despite the fact that he was flat out told by his commanding officer that he may sacrifice the crew of the carrier ship, should he see it necessary. While the pilot of the blue F-91 doesn't want to even think about that, the consequences of the Jupiter Empire getting their hands on it would be disastrous. Speaking of the Jovians, they have made their way to the ship, observing the scuffle and being assholes to the crew. They're after the same thing the Feddies are, and they waste no time as they go into their generic villain speech. Well, calling it a villain speech would be too strong of a word. It's pretty much just drawn out belly aching, something about them being sore losers and such. It is almost laughably petty, which Tobia does remark on. Speaking of the boy, he's right in front of them, having planted a small plastic charge onto the nearby window. He managed to sneak in, while everyone was distracted with the kerfuffle outside. Bernadette does notify him that the Crossbone Vanguard got what it came for, to which the boy simply smiles, and hits the detonator switch. The explosion is almost immediate, causing widespread decompression of the bridge and sucking both the invaders and the inhabitants into the void of space. However, before the 2 crew members fly off, Tobia catches them, grappling onto the ship and pulling them back to safety. In the meantime, Bernadette does come in with a core fighter to pick the pirate kid up. The leader of the Jupiter faction gets picked up by a new Jupiter Jabber unit. The Jovians give chase, and we see more of these new machines, which happen to be the EMS-12 Aranya, which explains why it looks like some spider hybrid. With Tobia heading towards the ship, he tells Old Man Umon to toss the Gundam his way. Harrison Madden watches the idle Gundam fly forward, almost dismissing it as a decoy. It finally reaches the core fighter, which promptly slots in. The machine starts to move, and its eyes light up. Opening its faceplate, the Pirate Gundam prepares for combat. Notably, it sports a skull insignia on its chest, likely a keepsake from the Crossbone Gundam X3. This is Tobia's very own machine, the XM-X1, Crossbone Gundam X1 Kai Kai, also known as the Skull Heart. Before its adversaries even prepare to strike, The Skullheart rips through several Jovian machines with ease. One Orion tries to go after the two crew members from the carrier ship, but Tobia kicks the scumbag off. As the boy tries to recover the duo, the hands of his machine get entangled in a tether of sorts. It appears that the Empire's forces brought in another mobile suit. The EMS-06B Orion Batala is a Batala variant with extra silly string, shooting additional tethers at the Skullheart to restrict its movement. Now seemingly disarmed, the Gundam gets overrun with Uranus as their commander prepares an attack. This guy's got a hell of a grudge, as well as a hell of a sword, but fortunately for Tobia, his machine's got a few more tricks up its sleeve. Or foot to be more specific. The Skullheart breaks out, stylishly dodges the incoming attack, and grabs another weapon, stashed on the machine's rear skirt armor. It's the Screw Whip, a weapon the boy uses to great effect to finish off the remaining enemy mobile suits. However, the sound of a nearby VSBR being drawn tells the pirate kid that this situation isn't over yet, or so it seems. Harrison Madden doesn't really want to fight the Crossbone Vanguard per se, given that he owes them one. At the same time, he makes it abundantly clear that if they're after the same thing he is, he will not hesitate to put them down. Tobia assures him that he's already got the thing he came here for, and leaves, although not before cutting a hole in the carrier, making its cargo skitter out into space. One of Harrison's subordinates asks whether he should pursue, but with all these crates floating around, it would be smarter to let the pirates go and worry about the Federation's troubles, which is something Harrison bluntly states, much to his commander's chagrin. As he goes after the cargo, listening to the outburst of his superior, the pilot of the blue F-91 starts to wonder about the obvious. What were the space pirates really after? The answer is rather short, yet quite wholesome nonetheless. It's a letter from Earth, specifically from Kincaid now. As it turns out, he and Bear got hitched, started bakery, and if I didn't know any better, this is where I'd put a joke about putting buns in the oven, given that in the photos they sent alongside the letter, we can see a little kid of theirs as well. Over in UC-136, Tobia Aronnax is taking a break in a colony of sorts. Over the years, the Crossbone Vanguard has turned to more legitimate means of making a living, with the boy, now 18 years old, operating a shipping company called Black Rose Shipping. As he's lounging underneath the artificial sunlight, he is approached by a mysterious stranger, whom some of you might recall from the Gigantis's counterattack manga, Victory Gundam Gaiden, and most recently from the manga Crossbone Gundam Love and Peace, where it is featured in a chapter set roughly 30 years before Crossbone proper. That's right, the man before him is none other than Judo Ashta of the Gundam Double Zeta fame, although now under the pseudonym of Grey Stoke. Last time we saw him in animation, he joined the Jupiter Energy Fleet. If we count Gundam Evolve, we also saw him a little bit after that, still kicking ass, albeit with some early 2000s era CGI. As it turns out, he's still alive after all these years, and he has come here to ask Tobia a favor. As outlandish as it may sound, he wants the young pirate to find and retrieve the late Amuro Ray. Now that is one hell of a premise. Well, long story short, it appears that Tobia will be returning to his old trade. Not that he would mind, honestly. Aboard the Little Grey, Captain Onmo, Bernadette and others set sail on a sea of stars, heading for an asteroid base. As Tobia prepares to head out, we get additional details on Grey Stoke's involvement with the Jupiter Energy Fleet, which he joined at the tail end of Double Zeta. During the fleet's prolonged trips carrying helium-3 from the Jupiter sphere, he apparently heard it through the grapevine that the Jupiter Empire came up with another underhanded scheme. As such, he decided to enlist the help of the pirates to take out this new threat. Speaking of, the forces stationed on the asteroid hastily scramble for their mobile suit and launch their batalas, anticipating a fierce fight. Little Grey readies up for combat as well, flipping up its flag and ejecting the living quarters block. On the deck, two mobile suits can be seen, one of which is the funny-looking mobile worker machine we saw at the start of the chapter, and the other one is the Gump. The Jovians are first to close the distance and almost immediately open fire. To their surprise, Tobia doesn't even try to dodge, he simply stands in place, as the incoming shots tear his disguise apart. Underneath the seemingly benign exterior, the Skullheart bears its fangs. There's also a slight error on the page showing the machine with the X1 Kai's chest insignia, even though the mobile suit is drawn with the newer Skullheart-style chest, as we'll see later on. As Tobia's mobile suit unleashes a barrage of beams at the enemy, Grey Stoke begins to ramble about Amuro Ray, remarking on his performance during the One-Year War. With the Skullheart blasting the Batalas once more, the pirate kid mentions his disappearance during the events of Char's counterattack. The new Gundam isn't just for show, and whatnot. 3 Flints arrive as backup, and we briefly flash back to Grey Stoke's explanation of what's going on. They're not really after the man himself. Even if Amuro wasn't either dead or missing in action 43 years ago at this point, he'd probably be of very little value to the likes of the Jupiter Empire. However, what the Empire did take was a floppy disk full of its combat data, retrieved from Amro's FFX-7 core fighter. What they intend to do with that data is to make a duplicate using the BioBrain technology to give Jupiter an edge over their adversaries. While it would take many iterations of trial and error to achieve such a thing, Greystoke has some bad news. These efforts already succeeded. While obviously far from the real thing, the Jovians had managed to create what appears to be a perfect killing machine, which is definitely not a thing one would want to face on the battlefield. In the meantime, the pirate forces have managed to shred the incoming Batalas, with the Gump not falling too far behind, despite its antiquated appearance. The Jovians at the base are trying to repel the attack, but their attempts are futile. The asteroid has been breached. Almost mirroring shots from the 1979 series, the pirates enter the base, with Old Man Umon being his usual cocky self. Tobia, however, is almost stopped in place by an intense sensation. It's definitely here. Almost instantly, Umon's flint loses an arm, with a sudden attack tearing it to pieces from a newly created hole in a nearby wall. The culprit walks out, its sole eye glowing in the darkness. The enemy machine that's making its way towards them is the Amakusa, the prickly, bitter fruit of Jupiter's experiments. If the machine ahead of them could think, its very instincts were pointing it towards a single thought: kill. Not giving its adversaries a single moment to regain their composure, the Amakusa springs into battle. It flies past the pirates in the front and fires a beam at Yona's unit, effectively bisecting it. Yona's lucky enough to bail out in the core fighter, but her mobile suit is done for. Jerry draws a beam rifle of his own, but he's not quick enough. The Amakusa is already in front of him. He doesn't even get to attack, before a slash from the Empire's mobile suit forces him to abandon his unit as well. As for the rest of the pirates, Umon's in a rough shape, courtesy of the attack from earlier, which leaves Stoke and Tobia to deal with the mechanical beast. At the very least, the Skullheart manages to get the Old Man Umon's core fighter out before the Amakusa turns its sights on Tobia. The young pirate, however, has a trick up its sleeve. The crossbow-esque weapon that he sortied with opens up a bit, turning it into what's effectively a futuristic duckfoot pistol. Charging forward, the Skullheart starts to spin, unleashing a devastating volley of beams. The problem is, Jupiter's little miscreant dodged them all. Oh, and it's got a spiked flail hidden in the shield, which it launches at high velocity. Tobia's unit barely dodges it, with the Gump losing its right leg. That explains the peg leg in Victory Gundam Gaiden. The Skullheart tries to get in some covering fire, but that isn't happening since the Amakusa manages to take out its right hand. Tobia's following attempt to draw a beam saber also goes nowhere, with the weapon being sliced apart before he even manages to point it at the enemy. The whole situation has the engineers at the base pleasantly surprised. The Crossbone Vanguard seems to have met its match, and a bunch of Batalas come out to try and finish the job. Here's the thing though, the Amakusa was trained on Batalas, and no one really told it about friendly fire, so the outcome is pretty much what you expect. The Jovians found out as well, but it's way too late. They don't stand a chance, being picked off one by one, at quite an alarming rate. With all the beams flying around, base isn't too long for this world either, and a lot of the bio-brains down in the labs get caught in the ensuing explosions, left without options. Tobia grabs Greystoke's unit and tries to evade the destruction around them. The pirates took heavy losses, but can't make a run for it, because the Amakusa is too dangerous to be left alive. If the Empire managed to capture it, the consequences would be disastrous, and as Greystoke adds, it would probably make it out of the base alive anyway. As such, their only option is to fight, which is a somewhat difficult task, given that A, the Amakusa reacts quickly upon seeing a weapon, and B, both the Peacock Smasher, that's the crossbow, and the Beam Zamber are both down for the count, leaving Tobia with only a few options in terms of weaponry. That being said, the boy has a plan. Spotting the Gump's double beam rifle, the Amakusa hurls the flail at it, but that's the opening Tobia was waiting for. The Skullheart flies in to intercept the spiky ball, and launches one of its hip-mounted anchors. It grabs the chain, and despite how fast the flail is moving, even to the point of yanking Tobia's machine around, the spiky ball is diverted into the Amakusa, Deus, effectively rendering it blind. The boy then punches out the unit's cockpit, and the Amakusa splits apart. Unfortunately, he missed the part carrying the bio-brain. The two pilots try to give chase, but the base is already starting to fully break down. Just like the Abawa coup over 70 years before, the asteroid base is engulfed in flames, as the little Grey can only helplessly watch on while the core fighters return. Tobia and Judo Ashta are still stuck in the base, with their escape route being blocked by fallen debris. However, on the outside, the damaged bio-brain starts conjuring a thought. Now left without any means of attacking, it spots two faint signals in the damaged base. Suddenly, Tobia senses something. It's a voice. Amidst the wreckage, he can hear something calling him, and since the boy doesn't have much options left, he and Judo decide to follow it, as the base erupts into chunks of rock and metal. Bernadette finally spots a silhouette of the two. They made it out in one piece, with the bio-brain aimlessly floating in space. Judo Ashta remarks on how similar their escape was to Amro's escape from the burning wreckage of Abawaku. Perhaps in their attempts to clone the late Federation pilot, the Empire inadvertently made the bio-brain into a new type. No one really understands how or why, but one thing is certain. With the replica brains all destroyed, and the remaining bio-brain unit being slowly dissolved as a result of its exposure to outer space, the pirates had dealt a heavy blow to Juber's forces. The ultimate soldier is no more. The next chapter here starts out on a cold open, as we see Harrison Madden, now a captain, piloting his blue mass-production F-91. As it turns out, he's gonna be the narrator on this one, being accompanied by Twink Stella Laberati, one of the previous narrator characters, as he fights a rather mobile adversary. Speaking of, who are these enemies that are putting his machine on the back foot? Monkeys! I'm not joking, they're actual monkeys. These space simians appear to be piloting a bunch of 4-armed mobile suits with a distinctive Xeon flair to them, the MS-06 MS Barbas. Worse yet, the monkey mono-eyes are headed right at the Federation pilot. We go back a few days, with Harrison baffled at the situation he's found himself in. The Federation's brass had sent him to investigate a series of incidents that took place inside a debris field near Side 2. Despite the initial suspicions pointing towards space pirates, a recent patrol had captured one of the enemy machines, whose pilot was clearly a monkey in a Xeon spacesuit. Aware of this, a nearby Federation commander breaks character to reference Tony Takazaki's series of parody Gundam manga. Fourth wall break aside, at the very least they got some help from a certain civilian, quote-unquote, company, Black Crow Shipping, which, as we know, is more of a front company for Tobia's Crossbone Vanguard, although they do some more legit work on the side. Recognizing Harrison's name, the pirate kid tries to act coy about seeing the blue F-91, now repaired and given some white paint on the limbs. Despite the initial awkwardness, the Federation pilot doesn't think much of it. Then again, his mind is focused on Twink. Apparently, Harrison has been nerfed since we last saw him. Not only is he not a lieutenant anymore, but he's also into flight women now, ticking the much-needed character flaw checkbox. Rest assured though, his preferences fortunately do not correspond with the ones shared by the various involuntary guests of To Catch a Predator and several breadtubers. They just made him into a DFC connoisseur for comedic effect. He also pets the cat that came on board with the space pirates. Speaking of those, Tobia exhales a sigh of relief that the Federation staff doesn't recognize him, and we're given a nice little nod to the 1962 Kubrick classic Dr. Strangelove. While we're not getting any fighting in the war room, there's an old man named Shina Kashiyuki who wastes no time paying homage to Peter Sellers' character from the movie. Seems to be an old tick from his days at Side 3. Anyways, the currently disguised little Grey of the Crossbone Vanguard makes its way to a seemingly derelict resource satellite ahead of them. Harrison and two of his men prepare to sortie as Twink tags along, hopping into the cockpit of the blue F-91. Twink herself is all excited, since it is not every day that she'll get to see monkeys in space. Wishing them luck, Tobia watches as a trio of Federation's mobile suits, the mass production F-91, a James gun, and a Javelin depart from the ship. Old Man Shino is a bit more on the edge, suspecting that he might know what lurks around at their destination. It finally clicks in his head, making him utter a single name: Project E. The project in question is something the old Space Knight heard of about 60 years ago. Allegedly, one of the Zabis had greenlit Project E after their arrival to Earth. In this case, you can pin the blame for Space Monkey Project on Garma Zabi, who got the idea, and I'm not making this up, after watching an ape play Pac-Man. If a monkey can play video games from the 80s, it might just be able to operate mechs from the 80s as well. That was the general concept. Despite the war ending before the Space Simians were ready, the project had been finished, and the base these monkeys were on was left to drift across the outer space ever since. Swapping over to Harrison's team, we find out that the satellite is still fully operational, although there doesn't seem to be any human personnel left alive. Twink goes out to retrieve the research notes, as the rest of the team continues to investigate. Having spotted additional equipment related to the project, such as cloning vats, Harrison begins to grow increasingly uneasy, especially since the more recent notes indicate that there has been a monkey mutiny of sorts. The fact that there's a bunch of heat signatures closing in on them doesn't really help either. As the Fedi forces scramble for the exit, Captain Madden spots an ambush and we get a closer look at the monkey Zakus. Undeterred by their arrival, one of his men, the one in the James gun, opens fire, but before any of his shots connect, the apes retaliate, causing heavy damage to his unit. Harrison tries to go after the monkeys, but even his VSBR shots get dodged. Taken aback by the persistent evasion of his enemies, he realizes something. These monkeys are new types. The old man, who's still on the ship, can't believe it either. Oh well, there ain't much to be done about that, so the fight goes on. Also, look at the poor sod in the Javelin, barely able to catch up. At this point, it's become obvious that the monkeys have driven Harrison into a proverbial corner. Not that it would change things, since the man doesn't seem to be the type that would back down from a fight. However, Toby has finally come up with a plan at last. It might compromise the Crossbone Vanguard's cover, but they can't leave the guy for dead. So the young pirate starts to work on countermeasures, opting to repurpose a spare anti-beam cloak, some rope, and a surplus of yellow paint that was laying around aboard the Little Grey. Before long, the preparations have finished, and it's in the nick of time, since the blue F-91 has lost both of its VSBRs. Now surrounded and outgunned, both figuratively and literally, the captain contemplates his options. If only there was some distraction to make an opening. He could definitely make that work. Luckily for him, Toby has arrived at last, throwing out the banana-shaped decoy. Monkeys see action, the neurons activate, and this is the opening that Harrison needed. With immaculate timing, he tears one of the monkey Zakus apart. The rest of the group turns around to face him, but a certain silhouette beats them to it. The Skullheart leaps in, taking out another ape. As for the blue F-91, it draws a beam saber of its own and follows suit. Having regained the upper hand, the two manage to dispatch the rest of the monkey force in almost perfect sync. With the monkey Zakus taken care of, Harrison Madden lets out a sigh of both exhaustion and relief. He tries to talk to the pirate who just saved his bacon, but Stobia makes a run for it. Once both the Skullheart's pilot and the Federation captain get back aboard the Little Grey, the two strike up a conversation. Despite its overall brevity, it touches on how both the monkeys they faced and humans themselves have a capacity for cruelty, to an extent. With Tobia pondering what would happen if people back on Earth learned of the new type apes. Harrison is a bit skeptical about them being new types, and we get a nice little callback to the monkey scene from the movie 2001 A Space Odyssey. Oh, and we see Zaku's acting silly, which is neat. Also, Harrison Madden is none the wiser to the fact that Tobia is a space pirate. This marks the end of Crossbone Skullheart, a collection of short stories, most of which take place between the 90s run of Crossbone and a later entry set in UC-136. Although only one volume short, this entry gives us a glimpse at how the world of the Universal Century develops, and leaves some signs of things to come. Minor gripes on my part aside, the 5 stories therein do a good job at it. We see that over the 3 years since the initial conflict in Crossbone, Toby has become a lot less foolhardy, somewhat abandoning the recklessness of his teens in favor of becoming more resourceful, with him thinking on the fly as opposed to relying on impulse. It appears that the boy took Kinkei's advice to heart. Overall, we got some nice character moments, and the short story collection format does work, despite Crossbone as a whole being better suited for something less episodic. Thanks to Umon's Tall Tales and the Monkey chapter, we did get some moments of levity, which is something one should relish, since from this point onwards, the tone is going to get serious again. Suffice to say, there's a lot to look forward to. Coming up next is obviously part 5. The story continues onwards with the 2006 manga Mobile Suit Crossbone Gundam, Steel 7. That too will come in due time. Steel 7 is going to be 3 volumes long, and not too far from where we last left our crew of space pirates. For now, I'd like to thank you for watching. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And this is the Shirt Lad, signing out.